Hi and welcome back to Cheeky Crypto. My name is Nick and today guys we're going to be jumping down into the charts to take a look at the price action of Vechain. Taking a look at what recent structures have emerged here that may give us an indication as to what happens next. As I get into the video, if you find it useful and informative, smash that like button. I do appreciate that. If you're new to the channel, why not consider subscribing and joining us down in Discord, because that is the first place that we go to notify you of what is going on in the crypto space. Okay, let's spend some time now talking about Vechain on the smaller time frames, and then let's take a look at those larger ones as well and see whether or not we are bullish or bearish on a macro or micro time frame. So here we have Vechain paired up with USDT on the hourly chart, and Binance is the data source. And as you can kind of see, we have this C wave up here. This was basically the 23rd of January. We kind of reached this upper limit. This is a 1-to-1 ratio, right? So if I just zoom out a fraction here, you can see big A, B, and C, and I do have this as an irregular flat correction in the middle here, basically giving this kind of irregular stance where the B wave goes higher than the origin of A wave and the C wave drops down lower than the ending structure of A wave. So we end up with this kind of expanding movement. Sometimes people call these things megaphone patterns because they kind of, just like a megaphone, expand out just like this. But our B wave movement here does have the lower high and a higher A wave here, but a lower A than the peak of B, and then of course the C wave coming down at those lows. So our B wave movement in itself on the macro does appear to be down here at about 2.122, and if I hover on that wick just to check that, the low is 2.122 according to Binance. So we can see that there. So we have this ABC structure. This isn't anything new. We talked about this in the last video, so you can kind of see that we have completed that move to the upside. Now, the interesting structures that are emerging at the moment form inside here after this particular move. I'm going to just move that out of the way just so we don't see that getting too crowded. So we had this peak up here. Okay, so our peak came in at 2.513. We moved down, we peaked up, we fell back down again pretty rapidly. Now this move to the downside does of course constitute a bigger move than we would normally expect of just a 3-wave structure. So it almost looks like maybe 5 waves has occurred in here. I think for the most part though, I would liken it more to a 3-3-5, where we had 3 waves coming down, 3 waves going up, and then 5 waves coming down. So I don't think we are correcting down with a zigzag or an impulsive structure. If I draw this in, you can kind of see here we had that kind of 5-wave movement just rapidly taking us into those lows. Now if I come down into a 15-minute chart and I check this peak up here, okay, this is where we're talking with that that high of 2.513. Okay, so if we take a look at that, okay, so we can see here that we have our 4th and 5th wave movements, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. That was easy to see on the hourly. But here we actually just have a 3-wave drop and a 3-wave move upwards with overlap. So a 3-3-5, in my opinion, is the best position for that. I don't think there's anything more going on here. So 3-3-5 taking us down here. That basically means that this is the end of a corrective structure in itself, and we start to move back up again. And again, we end up in a very obvious area where people want to kind of go 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But again, I don't think that's a good fit either. So let's come back down into our 15-minute chart. We'll take that low, and we can see a lot of overlapping structures right in here, and they do not constitute even a diagonal move. So it does look like we just have a corrective move coming up here, a corrective move coming down, and then we start getting into this next kind of nice run upwards, correction down, move up again. So this just looks like it's a move in 3. We don't think that constitutes anything more. Let me just do some sense checks though. We want to make sure we're right. Oh, it does. There you go. Okay, cool. So we can consider 4 and 5. So we can look at that as a 5-wave move right in here. So we'd go 1, 2, 3, big 4th wave down, which is unusual. They're not normally that deep. You would normally expect to come down towards the 38.2. So that would have been right about here at 2.433. And it does look like we came down a little bit lower than 50% of the retracement. So an unusual move, not the typical kind of structures that you would see for a wave 4, but it is what it is. Then we come up into the peak of 5. We just want to do some sense checks to see whether that reached the minimum, and it did quite nicely so. So that's all good. Then we move on down here, and again we end up with this overlapping structure, again not giving us huge amounts of confidence. We did peak up a little bit higher here, so the obvious again would be that we'd look for another irregular flat correction right in this little zone. I think it's probably not quite right, but we'll see where things are going here. Let's run with the premise that we're looking to map out 5 waves, and in order to do that, in fact, I think we're on the 15-minute chart at the moment, actually. Let's take this up into the hour, okay, and see. It looks like we're just coming down straight off the bat, but on the 15, let me come down to a 5. it happens very quickly here where we move up before we move down by the looks of it. Okay, so 1, 2, 3 overlapped. So it doesn't really unless that's a big wave 4 over here, and in which case this could maybe be a slightly bigger move. Let me just see if we can get that mapped out in any way, shape, or form. So let's pull a couple of trend lines on here just to make it a little bit easier. I mean, you could argue maybe it's an expanding diagonal. It's a loose fit at best, though. We'll be trying to make it work for us. But considering the setup, it's not impossible that we have a kind of 3-3 structure coming in here, meaning the next move is up briefly, probably going to be retesting those highs before coming down a little bit further. So let me map it out, right? 1, 2, and 3, this basically would have to be our wave 1. Then would come up into a wave 2 up here. Then this would have to be our wave 3, meaning we come up into overlap on wave 4, only to come down into a 5th wave movement, of which all of that, and bearing in mind we're on the 5-minute chart, this would be an irregular flat correction like this, come back to our hourly, and in here, we would have that irregular flat correction kind of mapping out. Now, that basically means that all of this is corrective, and we should then be starting to think about the next move to the upside. Now, it's possible, considering we've got this 5-wave move here and an irregular flat here, that we have another 5-wave move upwards to basically look to complete out A, B, and C structure like this. So on our smaller time frame, kind of expect the next move to be up. I think that's kind of the general consensus here. There's a potential move that we come down just a little bit lower on our hourly chart, right? And just kind of come down a fraction more before we move on up. But an upward move, I think, is something that we should be kind of, looking forward to. I would have to take this high here. I'm going to go ahead and run on the premise that we're doing this. And I'm going to assume that we're going to come down towards 2.421 and then potentially move back up again towards 2.507. I'll kind of say on that, that's kind of estimated where I kind of think things potentially could go. Not a guarantee, of course. So that's kind of the smaller time stuff, right? We can see the stochastic RSI is oversold. So again, would lead us into thinking, yes, some kind of small wave 4 and wave 5, and then a bigger move upwards after that. On the smaller time frame, or building up into the slightly larger time frame, I should say, the 4-hour can correct down and move up. It's got momentum in both directions. Not too much of a conclusive stand on that one. The momentum on the 8-hour, again, we can hover around these areas. It's not a problem. 12-hour has to come down. 16-hour, in my opinion, should be on the correction down. Same with the daily. The daily chart does need to come down, but again, I don't think we're necessarily done just yet. So on the daily chart, if I actually bring up this one, it's quite clear to see we're getting rejected from the 200 EMA. This is going to be the big battle with Vechain. It has got some momentum upwards on the daily chart, so we can see some move or break out of this 200 EMA area. But at some point, I think we're going to get dragged down. We can see that also on our death cross looming on the weekly here. So the weekly chart has progressed up into the overbought area, and the death cross is just around the corner there. Now, there are some positives. If you love drawing your trend lines, then of course you can acknowledge that maybe we're about to test or break through our trend line here, but bear in mind rejection on that 200 EMA on a daily also could be a big rejection point from here. But lower highs tend to break upwards. Remember this. Higher highs break down, and lower highs break upwards. So a break up, I think, is something that we should probably be thinking about here, at least on the shorter time frames. On the macros, on the weekly here, rejection is coming. I just don't think it's yet to occur. So keeping a close eye on that. Ultimately, our structures for Vechain are still looking pretty interesting. Let's come back up into this one, scale this down and over here a little bit. I still think that there is some room to the downside to be had on Vechain. I don't think the bottom is necessarily in just yet. I do think we're getting close to it, and then of course we can see some appreciation with that in the future. So I think, yeah, we're getting somewhere, but we're not necessarily there just yet. I do like this area down here at the 0.00799 to 0.00970, but I think that is very, very low. I don't think the price is going to necessarily come back down that leap or that low. I would expect some kind of retracement though, and a pullback to the downside. The obvious areas of consolidation really fall right in here. If I go and snap this on and right on here, okay, and if I make this a little bit bigger, and pull it across, this area is the area of interest. Previous area up here that was basically acting as support. Over here, we found it acting as resistance. And recently, just a few days ago, we tested this area and we shot right out of it. This is telling us there's a lot of demand right down here. This zone and this range, guys, is 1.964 to 2 cent. This is an area that I think we are likely to retrace to as a bare minimum. If we lose that, then of course, I think it's all fair game to start talking about move a little bit deeper than this. And I would probably say we want to focus in then on this secondary area of support, which would come in at about 1.727 to 1.816. Lose that, and well, really then you're talking about really testing those lows again before potentially making new lower lows. So lots of interesting things to happen here and to think about when it comes to the price action of Vechain. I am optimistic long term, but I do think that there's going to have to be some kind of medium term correction here before we can continue rallying on up. Again, the structure on the daily does give me some encouragement that thinking a retracement is going to come down. It's going to be quite nice, but you know, at best we are probably talking about some kind of corrective structure like this. At worst case scenario, we're already in the corrective structure, and this is actually just a B wave before taking us back down into those lows. So paying attention into these structures and into these retracement zones, I think is going to be absolutely critical if we are thinking that Vechain is going to be reaching its upper limit soon. So if we take a look at the first area of support to be found, it's pretty much on the 50% fib level. This is an area that we've already tested once, and coming back down here wouldn't be too difficult in my opinion. Dropping down lower than that, we're talking about just falling short of the 618 and staying above the 786. Again, these are key fib levels that we should be aware of. The higher that we push, we'll adjust those levels ever so slightly, so to bear that in mind. I'm going to leave this video right there. It's giving you a brief update as to kind of what I think is going on with Vechain at the moment. If you found it useful, smash that like button. If you're new, subscribe, and don't forget to join us down in Discord. Until the next one, guys, have a fantastic day.